So, bro, in the Bible, there's two men that never died. And who are these men?
Yes.
And what I mean by never died, because obviously people might be like, oh, there's two. You're alive right now. You ain't dead.
Right.
But there's two men that never died. Actually, tell us, who are those two men?
Yeah. According to the Bible, Enoch and Elijah are the only two people God took to heaven without them dying.
Yeah.
So that's what it means. Like, God took them to heaven.
Yeah.
Right. And, that's something that I want to kind of talk about. Like, why? Why did God took Enoch and Elijah? Yeah. Right now, the Bible does not specifically give us the answer, but the Bible does give us some clues and what those are. What were the reasons, right? And one of those reasons is in Genesis chapter 5. Let's look at it. Let's talk about first.
Who are we talking about first?
Enoch. Okay. Genesis chapter 5 and verse 21.
Man, as we go there, man,
24.
Enoch was on a different level.
And that's the thing. I'm trying to
I'm trying to be like Enoch.
Exactly. So Genesis chapter 5, verse 21 through 24, it says, Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. After he begat Methuselah, Enoch walked with God for 300 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Okay. Interesting.
Very interesting.
So two things that, that was repeated in there. Right? Enoch walked with God.
Yeah.
Now, what does that even look like? What does that mean he walked with God? I'm walking with God right now too as well. Right, I'm a Christian. I given my life to him. Does that mean I'm not going to die without seeing, heaven? Yeah. I mean, I'm going to get to heaven without dying. So what does that look like practically?
To be honest, something to take into consideration is that Enoch lived not too long after Adam.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so was Adam around when Enoch lived? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But he was not too long after Adam, which means that sin was not as bad as it is today. Now, don't get me wrong, because a couple of chapters after that, what happens? The flood. And then the Bible tells us that, hey, the reason the flood happened is because it was so sinful.
Right.
He could not, one thought was in man's mind that was righteous. It was all continually evil, right? But I think being so close to the origination of how God created man also plays a role. Because now, like back in that time, they were giants.
Right.
Now, bro, we consider like Shaq tall, 7 feet. I think Shaq is 7'2".
Yeah.
Yao Ming is like 7'6".
Yeah.
And then there's another dude, Taco Fall, he's 7'8". As you can see, I'm naming all basketball players. But they tend to be the tallest ones. But we consider that tall now.
Right.
But we know they were way bigger than that back in that time. Because even like years, hundreds of years after that, even thousands of years after that, you get Goliath, who comes on the scene, who is like 10 feet plus.
Interesting.
Right? So we know that if the DNA and stuff had dropped off and sloped off and things are getting like smaller and people are, because of that plays a huge role, I think.
Right.
I think that's going to play a big role.
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you for that. Now, Hebrews 11 verse 5, right? It was kind of, I was looking up Enoch. Okay, what was his life like? What was his brother doing? He walked with God, because I'm trying to do that too as well, right? But definitely taking that into consideration, exactly what you just mentioned. But in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 5, bro, I found something. And it says, by faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found because God has taken him. Watch this part. Watch his testimony, bro. For before he was taken, he had this testimony. What was his testimony? That he pleased God. So because bro, I'm a practical man. Like when I read the Bible, I'm just like, okay, how do I read the Bible and then literally leave that moment knowing to do something practically, right? I could do something practically.
How can you apply it right away?
Exactly. So Jesus took Enoch and he didn't see death. Why? Because he walked with God. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Walking with God means pleasing God. So how does one please God?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you please God? How do you put a smile on his face? Like, bro, I want that to be my testimony. Once RJ leaves, this earth, I want the testimony of RJ, known to be RJ, that was someone who pleased God. That was someone who walked with God, right? So how can we please God practically, right? Well, the Bible talks a lot about that. If you love me, if you want to please me, Jesus says, right? I think it's John 14 and verse 15. If you love me, do what? Keep my commandments, right? So one of the ways that we can please God and, the way we can walk with God is simply do what he says. Read the Bible, study it, and do what he says, right? I like it how someone puts it, man. The Bible stands for basic instructions before leaving earth. That's all it is. God, literally, it's a love letter to you and I. Hey, listen, my sons, my daughters, this is for you, before you leave earth, right? So I believe that Enoch was a man who literally walked with God and did everything he can to please him. Another way you can put that is keeping his commandments, doing what he says, and doing what he wants you to do, basically to do right in this world.
Yeah. As you're speaking, it makes me think about, Enoch pleases God, right? So the way he pleased God, how can you please God? And there's a verse in the Bible that says that God, when we lack faith or something like that, we cannot please God. Those who do not have faith.
Yeah, it's impossible to please him.
It is impossible to please him.
I think it's in Hebrews as well.
Right? Yeah. It is impossible to please him.
That's right. So
why?
Faith. That's a good point. Hey, I didn't even think about that.
It's impossible to please him if we don't have faith.
Yes.
Why is that? Because faith is taking God at his word. Believing that he will do what he says he will do.
That he is a rewarder of them who diligently seek him.
Yes. Right? But this is the thing. One of the things I've seen, even in my own life, is that, okay, yes, I'm going to take God by his word. But then one of the things I think we fail in is depending on that word to do what it says.
Come on now.
Like, now it's like, okay, yes, I believe your word.
Right.
But now I not only have to believe, but I have to live my life as if I depend on it
that word,
to do what it says.
Come on now.
And I think that's what happened with Enoch. The way he pleased God is he had faith. And he depended on God to do what God said he will do.
That's right.
And so God is like, hey, I want to give you a new heart. Jeez. I want to take away the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I want to change this. I want to do that. God is telling us these things, and Enoch is actually living by those things.
Yeah, and it's very encouraging because when you look at the days of Enoch, at that time, bro, it was corruption that was happening on earth. Sure. Like, it was literally right before the flood. Yeah. And remember, we talked about that too, that right before the flood happens, there was continual evil going on. So that encourages me and motivates me because, bro, you can literally walk and please God in the day of corruption and the evil age of corruption. You know what I'm saying? So that we can still be, in a sense, walking with God and with sinful and corrupt things that are happening. We can resist temptations and things of that nature, right? Yeah. So I like that. And it helps me out too as well.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about Elijah.
Yes.
Because Elijah's a little different.
Yes.
Like, okay, so Enoch, we don't really have a history of him doing anything crazy.
Yeah.
We don't have too much in the Bible of him.
Right.
But then Elijah, we do have him doing some things where he believes in God, and then all of a sudden, fire comes down from heaven.
Yes.
Destroys the altars.
Yes.
And it's like, you were praying for this. You prayed and it stopped the rain. But then now you're running from Jezebel because you're afraid and don't really trust God.
Yeah.
Talk to us. Like,
so let's read it. Let's read it. The account is found in 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 2 and verse 11. Suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elijah was perhaps one of the most powerful of God's prophets in the Old Testament, bro, like when you read about him. But like you said, bro, like at the same time too, like it was in turbulent times what this brother was living, like, with Jezebel and King Ahab, and things of that nature, Israel, the evil of their ways, and, and things of that nature. So for me, again, another one, right?
Yeah.
While he was living on earth, that time was just continual evil that was happening, but yet one person was still walking and pleasing God. Again, that encourages me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you were saying like, there was something like that he did wrong in a sense, right? So that is also encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like I think that is encouraging because you know why that's encouraging to me is because like you look at Enoch and you're like, man, I don't know, bro, he ain't doing anything wrong. Like, so therefore that's not really going to be applicable to me. Like, man, I've sinned, I've done this, I've done that. Like, obviously we know Enoch wasn't a perfect man in the sense of he didn't never sin, but it's like we don't have any accounts. So like he's less relatable.
Right, right.
But then you look at Elijah, who was taken to heaven, who never died, and it's like, bro, that guy's relatable.
Right.
Because he did some things that were in the world, and he ran and got scared, and like he had fear even though he fully trusted in God.
Yep.
Like he's more relatable to me. And so what that does is it gives me hope that, hey, this dude, I can actually be like Elijah in the eyes of God.
Exactly.
And not see death.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the goal. We want that, right? Because the Bible talks about that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 51. And then I feel like they're a representation when Jesus Christ comes the second time, that we will not see death and be translated as well.
Sure,
because the Bible speaks of that, in the twinkling of an eye, right? And so I feel like, man, bro, that is the goal for you and I, right?
Why do you think these guys never saw death?
They walk with God, right? What does walking with God means? They please God in everything. What does pleasing God means? They kept his commandments and did what he said, right? And how do you do this practically? Stay faithful to him even in the days of everybody is not being faithful to you, to God, right? Like they were just like one of those that's just like, you know what, I'm gonna be faithful to God despite of everybody around me who's not doing, everybody's drinking, everybody's smoking, everybody doing drugs and all of these things. I'm gonna be faithful to God. I'm gonna please him.
And I think something to add to that that's very important is it wasn't that they did anything themselves to keep the law of God.
100%.
It was they
Christ
had
working
faith,
in them.
right? It was Christ working in them.
The hope of glory.
They had faith, and they believed that the word of God would do what it was
true.
said.
Was true. Yep.
And so then, boom, God said, "You know what? Come with me."
Yep. Two men who never died. Like there's some great lessons that we can
for sure.
Yeah.
And in fact, we know that there is a third person in heaven, which is Moses.
Yeah.
But he died.
And that's something. Yeah.
And that's a whole nother story. Because you look at Moses and it's like, oh, like that brother got angry.
Yep. Yep. That's another episode that we
gonna yeah. So okay, cool.
Yep.
So two men that never died, Elijah, Enoch. Let's learn from them, study them. Put them in the comments below. Show us what you learned.
Yep.
And we'd love to move forward with you guys and learning more. Click the notification bell, subscribe, turn that on so you don't miss another episode.
That's right.
Until next time.
Peace.
Peace.